And you know the routine of it. A podcast is about building an audience who has an appointment with you. That's one of the tricks I learned, right? If you miss that appointment, which because I am a one-woman band, it is tempting to do, then you break that kind of trust with the listener and then they might just go somewhere else, right? So you've got to make that appointment. Mine's every Wednesday.
Mm-hmm. As is every Monday.
And if you miss your Monday, then your audience is like, what do you mean? I was waiting for you. It's like you stood them up for coffee.
Oh, I'd be so excited if someone felt like I stood them up because then they really care, you know? Like that's kind of cool that you've got someone there.
You know what, Steph? They will really care because I love podcasting so much because it's a conversation that you're having, an intimate conversation that feels like you're just having it with the listener and you start to become their friend and vice versa. And it is like, I wasn't involved in the early days of blogging. I was a regular journalist then, but you guys, you'd know this. It's like it was a pioneering time when you could use a new medium to change the way that you told stories. And that's what podcasting is to me now.
100%.
Plus, you don't have to look at me, and I love that because I'm quite old.
We love that too.
But there's like a level of intimacy in a podcast that never really existed before in anything that we did. So like definitely for the first few episodes, we were like, this is so weird. Like we're in people's headphones and when they feel like we're talking to them, which has been like a new adjustment for us.
You know what else? You can't hide. And that's something I actually love because on social media, you can hide. Obviously, stories has changed the game, so people have to be a bit more honest and raw. But the kind of glossified perfection that made Instagram the success that it is also what makes people bored of it. And in audio, you can't lie, you can't hide. You are what you are. You say what you think. It comes out. Your personality, you can't hide it. And I love that because I think that's the secret. Like if you're actually authentic, and I know that's a cliched word, but for me, talking about sustainability, if I really care about it, you can tell.
Yeah, totally. For sure. And I think that's what was scary for us and exciting because it's like, oh, someone's actually listening to what I'm saying now. I better have something good to say.
Yeah, I was terrified of that. Like, you know, the imposter syndrome kind of thing. I'm like, oh no, what if I start talking and people realize I'm just like not great?
It's the opposite though. They realize that actually there's so much more to you than what you look like. But obviously it's important how you portray that image because you're fashion girls. But I hate saying girls, you're adults.
We go with girls anyway.
We like girls.
I feel like it's so
Makes
bad
us feel
to call
young.
people girls. But there's much more to it than just what you look like, hey?
Yeah.
Definitely.
So before you started a podcast, you had a long history of writing.
I did. So I've been a fashion journalist for 20 years, but I'm only 30.
Amazing, isn't it?
It's amazing. So I've always been in the market, if you like, of telling fashion stories. I've always done that through the written word. I've never been on the telly. But in recent years, I've changed my approach and my game, I suppose. So now I focus purely on sustainability. So a lot of my work is actually talking at events, talking in live situations, emceeing things, hosting panel things. And then the podcast is just like this lovely adjunct to that.
So before this, was it like all fashion before you discovered this passion for sustainability?
Only fashion.
And so where were you doing that? What are some of the places that you've worked?
So I always worked in magazines. I started out at Oyster magazine, which is still around. But when I was there, which was a long time ago, it was a very... it was kind of a rare beast because independent, extremely good paper stock. And that matters because photographers wanted, it was submission based. So you could basically create your own vision without having, you know, the kind of parameters that come in commercial magazines. But the paper stock was why photographers came to us. So we worked with incredible people. Like I was telling someone the other day that I remember doing a shoot and it was Chloe Saveni. And I'm sure that Harmony...
I love her.
Amazing, right? And
So
Harmony
good.
Corinne, who was the director of Kids, he was involved. I can't remember if he was the photographer or if he was just producing it. But we had access to these incredible big names internationally from our little office in Sydney. So it was a great place to work when you were a kid.
Totally. So how long have you been in Australia for?
Since I was 22 or 3.
So just long enough to keep the amazing British accent.
I'm married to an Australian, so I have to fight to keep this British accent.
It's
Yeah, you've got it strong though, and you must have been around Australians for a while, so good job.
Our dad moved here from France when he was about 23 and he thinks he sounds Australian but has a thick French accent.
I love a French accent. Do you have one?
No. He's like the one person we can't imitate. Like, I can do British, but I cannot do French.
I expected you both to look at me and go, no. And you're like, nah.
We're like, nah, mate.
He says mate in like this. He can do like the mate in Australian. So like the whole sentence is French, and then the end we'll just say like mate, and it sounds really odd and weird.
I love language. I love the word mate. I actually used it this morning on Instagram. It makes me laugh. I love the richness of different words and language, and I think that that's something charming.
Mate is a little bit British as well, right?
All right, mate.
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah.
If you say it with a British accent, anything is British,
It's
right?
true.
Vegemite.
Kangaroo.
I'm not playing this game. Ask me a serious question.
We will in a little bit, but before we get to that, we want to hear all about your fabulous fashion career and what that was like. Was it very Devil Wears Prada? That's what we always get asked.
You know, there are elements of that do exist within the industry, and I think that those cliches always are born from some kind of truth. I'm not just talking about magazines, but the whole kind of fashion setup in the olden days used to be quite kind of based on fierce hierarchy, and if you were the intern then you couldn't look at anyone. And I know that sounds absurd, but actually there is an element of truth in it. I do think however that stuff is old-fashioned. So The Devil Wears Prada is one of my favourite films. I mean, think about Meryl Streep going, that's all.
I know.
It's
so
just brilliant. Now, I've never worked for that kind of character, but you certainly have seen it, felt it, that kind of, I'm going to say culture of fear.
Yeah.
That I think kind of ripples through old-fashioned fashion. And I use that phrase deliberately because I think we're in a new era where that stuff is just absolute rubbish, and we shouldn't and mustn't put up with it. And also it's just changing. Like, you've got a new guard of people who are now running fashion, and it's much more diverse, much more egalitarian, and damn well should be, right? Because who wants to go to work and be scared, you know, of the designer who you're not allowed to look at or whatever it is. I think it's similar in other creative industries, music, for example. This is just apocryphal and probably isn't even true, and I'm talking about someone who I absolutely love, and he's one of my idols, so I hope it's not true. But I was always told, because I did used to work at Rolling Stone, that you were not allowed to look at Bob Dylan in the eye.
It's interesting.
Don't look at Bob. Don't look at Bob.
It is an interesting one, though. I feel like it goes along with, like, just fashion in general becoming more relaxed, you know, like in the olden days, as you're putting it. Like, fashion was, I feel, much more serious. And if you were interested in fashion, it had to be very highbrow. Whereas now, you know, everyone's still in sneakers in the office. Like, there's that level of casualness.
The casualization of fashion and culture is a real thing for sure. But I also think that when we talk about kind of changing guards and changing society, it's about a democratization. So people are just fed up with someone on high telling them how it's going to be. And if you look at how social media has changed the whole of the media game, then that's kind of an example of that. Because you two can create a whole world and build your whole incredible audience for how to live. You can do that from your living room. You can do that from, I know your story about saying, I'm just going to email some fashion shows in Paris and say, can I come? And the answer was yes.
Yeah.
So we're in a different world now where the walls have come down, and you actually can, if you've got talent and a fresh idea and a strong voice, you can break through. And that's rad. But as I'm saying that, I'm also thinking there was also always that element of fashion, and that's the bit I love. Like, it's not that we never had that possibility. If you look at the coolest kind of fashion in the 80s, or the ways that fashion shows used to run before they became corporatized, they were always overrun with amazing fashion students. It was like getting into a nightclub. Like, if you had the right look, then they would let you in. And I think that's gone because of the corporatization of it. So there's never a kind of one answer.
But I think you're right in terms of like this democratization of fashion. The way we got into the fashion industry was totally in the back door. And so then when we're building our own company and we're hiring people, it's not going to be that traditional stuffy Devil Wears Prada, that's all. Even though I do like to say that to our employees just for fun. You know, it was always going to be like, okay, well, this is fun. We got into this in a fun way. Let's create that for our team. We want them to have the same experience with fashion that we've had.
Totally. One of my favorite subjects is business with purpose, and just that word purpose. Like, how do we want to live? How do we want to work? And how are we going to organize our worlds to reflect that, I guess. So again, it's like old guard, new guard, but the old way of I want status, I want money, I just think that's really old-fashioned. And I don't really meet a lot of young people who feel that that's what they're trying to pursue. Like, they don't, if you ask them to make a list of their life goals, they're not going to say, maybe some of them are, but those that I meet are not saying money, status. They're saying fulfillment,
lifestyle,
feeling that I'm doing something worthwhile.
Yeah, and feeling valued.
Also having an environment that's nurturing and that is fun and that is somewhere you want to go to work. And if you're going to build a workplace, that's the kind of workplace I want to build. I mean, I didn't, because my workplace is just me and my cat.
Yes.
Oh, but I've heard it's a really good place to work, though.
Awesome.
What's your cat's name?
Pix.
Cute.
Pix is my first and only employee.
Maybe you
Meow.
should get Pig's a friend, and then you could have 2 employees.
Stop now. I'm going to get an army and I'm going to say, that's all.
We actually have, we try really hard in our office to have like great office culture, obviously, because our brand is all about fun and having fun with fashion. And you can't really say those things without actually doing them from the inside out. And so we do things like we watch The Bold Type on Thursdays at the moment. And when Younger comes out, we're going to watch Younger on Fridays. And like we love just like TV. We even do snaps on Friday afternoon where we all sit around and like share something delicious and we write down like nice compliments for each other for the week. Which
We all want to do vision
work
boards.
with you.
You
Can
can
I
work with
come
us.
work for you?
For sure.
Absolutely.
Well,
got
that was our
skills.
next question. Do you want to come work with us?
Sure.
You can be our sustainability what's it?
Guru?
Advisor?
Yeah, exactly. There you go. You just gave your own title.
Well, speaking of Devil Wears Prada, which is obviously we all know based on Vogue,
Well, I don't think it's necessarily based on Vogue. Lauren Weisenberger did work at American Vogue. So I guess her experience or her observations about the industry broadly probably coloured her narrative. I've never met her, so I've never asked her. I don't know. But I think it's more of a broad commentary on just what that kind of environment, and it could be a fashion house too. It doesn't have to be mags. It's like, that's just that kind of great, frightening, fascinating cliche of what traditional, scary fashion land might look like. But it is also like highly camp and a send up. You know, it's not, life's not really like that.
Yeah, it's so much fun. We all love it. But I was trying to segue into Vogue so we could talk about the fact that you are the sustainability editor at large of Vogue. And we would love to hear about that. I mean, I feel like editor at large is the fanciest title ever. We'd love to know what it actually means.
What does it mean? Can you tell us?
Don't ask me. It's so hard to explain what it means. I can explain the sustainability part, but if you want me to explain the at-large part just briefly, first of all, it basically means that it's almost like roving. I mean, I am at large in the world. I don't work in the office. I could go in there if I wanted to, but I'm not based in the office, so I'm a kind of roving creature, but I'm not a freelancer, so I don't work for other magazines.
It reminds me of the guy he was a judge on America's Next Top Model, and he was an editor at large, I think, of Vogue. Tally?
Andre Talley.
Talley.
Oh, I love Andre
ALT.
Talley.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just the best person. I just think
great
that,
documentary.
come on, the best documentary. I'm obsessed with fashion films, and I thought that was a wonderful, amazing portrait of a man who's just a true original. And how does he dress? I love it.
It's amazing.
The
This
whole
is
thing
why I
kind
got
of
into
broke my
fashion.
heart, though, to be completely honest.
did it?
I felt sad afterwards. But anyway, you guys will have to go watch it for yourselves.
I'll have to watch it. I haven't watched it yet.
Another one, if we're going to plug film, so I'm fascinated by fashion stories, and it was always the characters as opposed to, as I said, the kind of status or money or whatever. It was always the people that fascinated me and drew me to this world. And I'm looking at the back of your laptop, and there is a sticker of Iris Apfel, like a cartoon iris head. Those characters, that's why I like clothes.
She's amazing. She's like out of this world. She is a cartoon character in real life.
I interviewed her.
Oh my goodness.
Stop. We were going to ask you about Kim Kardashian, but I want to know about I know.
Iris Apfel is way better. Can you dish on that interview?
It was. I'm sorry to have to admit this because it's a shame, but it was on the phone. But it's actually quite a good story, though, because it was on the phone. She couldn't hear a word I was saying. And I had, because I adored her, and, you know, I've read her Rare Bird of Fashion book, and I've watched her film, but I've also just done quite a lot of research into the clothes and the history of how she collected. I had put in a hell of a lot of work into this interview and crafted these really fascinating questions. I knew she was going to vibe off them, but the interview is me saying long-winded questions and her going, "What? What? What was that, dear?" So yeah, sometimes it's not as glamorous as you think it is.
Well, could Kim Kardashian hear you when you interviewed her?
Kim Kardashian was a lot of fun. You know what? She is what you see is what you get, and she's actually a pretty cool person, and there's no secrets there. So again, she's a person who I think really thrives in this new era where you can't hide, because actually she's really authentic to herself. She's not fake. So I actually loved her.
In what capacity did you interview her?
Oh, it's just a story about how fabulous she was.
Like
I
a
used to do a
printed
lot more
story?
a printed story.
Yeah.
I used to do a lot more of those kind of celebrity interviews than I do now. I spent 6 or 5 years as the features director of Australian Vogue a long time ago. So I think I left in 2009, that job. And then I also I've worked at Marie Claire. I was a fashion editor at large again there. So I interviewed a lot of designers for that. I've had a kind of long career of interviewing all different people. And at different stages of my career, they've been either really famous actors or... I used to work at Rolling Stone. I mentioned that when I was really young. I was after Oyster. I worked at Rolling Stone. for a year. It was really great. So I interviewed loads of famous rock stars.
That's
Cool.
really
That
cool.
sounds
And we saw
amazing.
Beyonce as well. You have a great list going.
Do you know what? Beyonce was a really interesting interview. I was at Vogue at the time, but in my previous incarnation. She was less famous than she is now, but it's interesting just to think how the era has changed in terms of access to talent or interview subjects. I went to New York. I saw her 3 separate times to do this story. I went to the studio where she was recording. There must have been record company people there, but there weren't minders there trying to stop you or make sure you only ask questions for 2 minutes that they'd already seen before. It just wasn't like that. Like, it was really, there was lots of open access. She was incredibly open, and we weren't kind of micromanaged in the way that now the media is so micromanaged.
Yeah.
You can't interview anyone without having to say, here are my 3 questions in advance. Are they okay with 12 PR people? Come on.
Well,
Yeah.
we're interviewing you right now, and you didn't say that to us, so thanks.
No way, man. I would not ask for questions. I might ask for talking points so that I could prepare, so that I could not let you down, but I don't believe that journalism is about a staged script. Interestingly, when I do my podcast, I do actually provide quite robust questions in advance, but that's so that I can anchor myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I like it when the guests don't read them. Because I want them just to answer.
Same, yeah. I mean, like, we have, like, lengthy questions written down. You know, we do, like, write the interview, even though, like, it forms its own life, shapes its own life. But it's always a bit more fun and a bit more fresh when they haven't quite prepared every answer.
As someone who's worked in this space for a long time and watched the evolution of that micromanaging thing I just said, you really don't get the best out of people if they've pre-prepared answers. And I do understand that people don't want to be ambushed if, for example, they're actors and they're quite private and they're talking about a film. I get that. However, as a journalist, it's rubbish. Who wants that? Who wants the staged response? Or worse, the email response?
Oh, yeah.
Did you even write that?
Yeah. So with your current role at Vogue, that role didn't exist before you have taken it. Is that correct?
It is, yeah.
Cool. And how did that kind of come about? Were you pushing for that, or did they come to you?
It was just honestly came out of a conversation. We are extremely lucky at Australian Vogue now to have one of the best, I think, globally in the world editor-in-chiefs in Edwina McCann, and she's a really genuine, visionary, brilliant person. And she's got big ideas and she's open to big ideas. So it came because they had put together a sustainability issue, which was for March 2018, guest edited by Emma Watson. And the idea was that would be entirely focused on sustainability and on responsible fashion and the kind of fashion of the future. And Emma Watson is genuinely massively into sustainability. Mm-hmm. But then it was decided, why just do it for one issue? And the idea of bringing me on board was to have a focus that was continual, so that it was a continuous lens from my perspective, not from everyone in the office, on sustainability. That means that we're actually committed to it in the long term. And it's been an experiment, but I also think it's been a successful one. There's been quite a lot of interest just generally from the market, if you like. People are interested that there's the creation of this new role. And for me, it's been, it's a dream, because I get to talk about the things that I really care about and have spent years researching and trying to become an expert in. I get to do that with a heritage brand and with some authority behind the messaging, which, that's not to be sniffed at.
So I'm really interested. Does the conversation kind of go past just what your the content that you're creating? Is it a conversation around the office being from a magazine, like things like paper wastage and all of that? Like, is it a larger conversation, like minimal waste in the office? I don't know, putting dollars towards more sustainable practices, things like that?
It's a good question. I can't answer it really well because I don't work in the office, and I'd be lying if I said to you that I'm impacting on how people think about their composting or their plastic use in the office. What I would say is that people that work in media, and this includes all of the Vogue team, are absolutely looking at the zeitgeist and where the cultural conversation is shifting. That's their job, and that everyone I know at Vogue is actually interested in this stuff, even if they're not working specifically in sustainability and I'm just the weirdo doing that. Everyone is engaged in it, and I think right now, in the cultural moment we're in, you can't escape the need to look at waste, to look at carbon, to look at all of it. But it's not really my job to kind of, I guess, introduce different systems in the way that the business works. I'm more to do with content and with framing the conversation for our readers around the sustainability issue in the fashion industry.
I think it's so cool that there's been, you know, such a shift over the last like 10 or even 5 or even 2 years, that there's now the need for this role, and everybody's kind of recognizing, okay, we really need to change the way the fashion industry operates. How did that kind of come about for you? How did that shift happen from working in fashion to taking a step back and going, okay, wait, there's a problem here and I want to be part of the change?
I had to actually be like, listen to Stef, Claire, listen to Stef. Because I was thinking, oh my God, I need to go in the office and check if people are using plastic straws or not. I need to go and get some systems in there to make sure we're composting. How it happened for me was that there were 2 things that happened. There was a catalyst in the form of Rana Plaza. So it's quite fantastic that you invited me on your show during or in the run-up to Fashion Revolution Week.
Yes.
It was no coincidence.
So as you would know, but maybe if listeners don't know, I might just say what that is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would love that.
So it's a global campaign that was founded in the UK but is now everywhere, like over 100 countries, called Fashion Revolution. And it's hinged on this idea of a hashtag called Who Made My Clothes? And the idea that if we all shared that on social media and asked brands to answer that seemingly simple question, we could change the way that the industry operates. We could have more transparency. We could understand who is that in the supply chain, how are they being treated, and are they being treated fairly, and where are the problems? The campaign was born out of a disaster that happened in Bangladesh in April of 2013.
I remember that.
Do you remember?
I was at uni at the time and I was just watching it. It was terrible.
And I think like so many people felt that. I remember watching it on the news and just seeing those images of those buildings collapse going, what on earth? Like, first of all, I didn't understand what it meant, as we didn't.
Mm-hmm.
But do you remember that as well? Do you remember that unfolding?
Yeah, of course.
I mean, the story was a really gross one. So these buildings in a factory complex outside of Dhaka in a place called Savar in Bangladesh, they has lots of different factories making for multiple brands. The buildings had started to show visible cracks, and so it was clear that they were unsafe. But the workers were ordered back inside them the next day because of the pressure of orders to be fulfilled. So it was like, we know that this is not a safe working environment. However, we got work to do, so we'll do it at your expense. Now, at your expense meant that when the buildings collapsed, 1,138 people died.
No way. I didn't remember it being so many people.
I remember that because actually it was in early reporting, we were hearing about 100 people have died, or maybe more than 150 people, or maybe 300 people. But in the end, those numbers climbed to that level, and it's just absolutely horrifying. And some more gross numbers that will shock you. Up to 2,500, we think, children were orphaned as a result.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I remember seeing
yeah.
a lot of videos of children just like crying. It was really, really shocking. And I was at uni studying fashion and textile merchandising at the time, and it was definitely like a big conversation that we were having before that happened. And then it was like just, I don't know, funny timing that it happened while we were kind of doing that subject, and we were like, this is exactly what we've been talking about.
But did it make you freak out and worry that you're working in this industry?
At the time, I don't think it did. Like, there was definitely a disconnect for me, like, in the immediate, to be like, oh, well, like, I don't buy from brands that, like, would produce there and whatever, you know, I guess, like, that's quite naive. But definitely, like, through our journey to, like, you know, particularly, like, starting our own label and having our own suppliers, that's something that, like, has always been like, okay, no, we go to visit, we see, like, we make sure we choose the right ones because, yeah, I mean, I think that even being a small brand, like, we all have something to say for it.
It can also be even harder, or perhaps not even harder, but it can be very difficult for small brands to know what to do, because how are you supposed to go and check out the factory? You can't afford auditors. You probably can't afford a plane ticket to go and have a look. And if you did go, they may well say, well, sorry, you can't come and see. Or they may say, okay, you can come. Here's our glossified, beautiful version of what we want you to see. But you might not know that that work is being farmed out to second and third contractors who might be working at home with no safe conditions or being paid shoddily. So what happened as a result of this big humanitarian disaster that was caused by the fashion industry is that all these questions started bubbling up, and then people started asking them in a wider context. So instead of saying, well, Benetton produced in that factory, but if you didn't, you're not culpable, so we don't have to worry about it. what the Fashion Revolution campaign and also all of the reporting around it has done is change the conversation so that we have to look at all of the system and say, well, that was one factory and the worst example, but it's not the only one.
Totally. So, I mean, we found out about Fashion Revolution Week only very recently, because we love to be transparent about who makes our shoes. We personally go twice a year. We go to China. We visit the factories. We make sure that it's an ideal working environment.
Yeah.
And we were posting Insta stories and posting the factory workers and the suppliers and writing things about them, like, you know, these are their names, these are what they like to eat, this is where they like to go and go on holiday, and, you know, kind of humanizing them, because people just kind of, you know, they don't have a face. And then someone said to us, there's this thing called Fashion Revolution Week.
Did you do it without knowing that that was part of a campaign?
We had done this.
We did it on a small scale.
Yeah.
So we just did it with like our 3 head suppliers there, and just like a cute little like Insta stories thing that you could click
because
through.
you're curious.
Yeah. And then like, and we
people
love,
are asking.
and we love them. Like, you know, we don't have anything to hide. I think that's a thing that like in the beginning we were a bit like, oh, should we be being cagey about who our suppliers are and where they are? And then we were like, well, no, like they're actually
just because it was China. That was why we were like, oh, should we not be talking about China? Is that taboo? Are people not going to want to buy from a label that's made in China?
I think that, Steph, you raise one of the biggest problems, if you like, with this whole area. Well, there's 2 kind of sides to it. One is that you can be overly simplistic about it, like, oh, sustainability. You know, it's just, that lends itself to greenwashing, but, you know, it's just, it's green or it's fair, it's all fine. So we try not to make it too complex. But the other side of it is that the complexity is just rampant, and it's really difficult for people to unpick it all. And once you start getting into one side of it, you fall down the rabbit hole. You can read, I could spend a whole day reading reports about water toxicity from the denim industry. Really? You're going to do that as a shopper? So the complexity is actually a problem. It's a problem for people who just love fashion. It makes them switch off. So we've got those 2 sides of it, like either the kind of simplification that makes it meaningless, or you've got this kind of crazy weight of research that we cannot expect people who just want to buy a beautiful dress to get involved with. So I feel like our job, and I include you, as storytellers, is to try and cut through that, put a bit of a human face on it, make it fun. If you can make chemicals fun, good. If you can make the stories of boring reports about carbon pollution accessible, then you've done something amazing. And what you really want is just an emotional connection. So we all love clothes, like we were talking about it before. Why do you love the fashion industry? Why did you start? Why do you love that dress, that shirt, that shoe? If we could make those feelings applicable to the human stories around how our clothes are made and the potential environmental impacts, then we've done something really good.
Yeah. And so talking about like, you know, simplifying versus the complexity of the issue, like I'd love to have you here who is an absolute expert. Like, you know, if there was a uni student who, you know, loved fashion, that, you know, they could afford to shop at Zara and get all the things that they wanted, you know, what would you be telling them? Like, why should they care about this on a very simple level?
I mean, the first thing I say is, who wants to be into unsustainable fashion? We were talking about old era versus new era. To me, irresponsible, unsustainable fashion is not a goal. And if it were a goal, it's a pretty poor one, isn't it? I'm not excited about that. I want to be part of the dazzling future that's where we're all headed, not the kind of boring past where we did everything wrong. Now, I'm not suggesting the future's all perfect and the past all sucks. However, we're in a watershed moment where sustainability is becoming mainstream, and it's absolutely the future. So anyone who's getting into fashion as a student, this is how you need to be thinking. If you're not thinking like this, I would say you're going to fail, because the industry isn't going to be open to old thinking. Fashion's really fast moving. New jobs of the future are about understanding how impacts on people and planet figure into the design process, all this stuff around circularity, like, do you know what that is? So that's another one
like
of those words.
Loop.
Right.
Yeah, we're working on ours at the moment.
But can you explain to people
like,
that might not know what it is?
Super simple. The old linear economy is take, make, discard. So that means you go and take the resources. So think of them as coal, right? So polyester is derived from petroleum, which is derived from oil. So you go and take the oil out of the ground, then you turn it into polyester, then you make it into something, and then
it gets thrown
discard
out.
it.
Yeah.
So you think about all the stuff that's gone into making that garment. You've got all the natural fossil fuel resources that are finite. We don't have them forever. Then you've got all the human ingenuity, all the hands and all the effort. 80 pairs of hands on average touch a garment from start to finish. So all that human effort has gone into making it. Then you got to sell it. The whole system is geared towards effort, right? And then you throw it away. It's completely stupid.
Yeah, the throw it away part doesn't make any sense.
How is it efficient?
Yeah, so the closed loop part then comes in by at the end of its life. Then I guess like for us, we're looking at how we can take back our shoes and then like use it to recreate shoes or recreate something else.
See,
and
I
there
got
was
excited then.
Yeah, we've been meeting with some incredible people who are in shoe recycling, and
yeah, yesterday a guy came to our office, and it's someone we kind of like gave the job to someone in our office, and we were like, you know, can you find someone who can take the shoes? And he came over yesterday and he was like, oh, well, I could actually take the material on your upper and turn it into yarn and make a carpet for you. And he started like saying, he's like, we could make tires from this part. And it's pretty amazing what you can do if you just ask and start to research.
I'm so excited to hear that. This is kind of new stuff, although some of it, in a way, is old-fashioned because we always used to be more mindful of resources. But the upcycling, innovation and tech side of how we can take stuff that's worn out and then make it into something new, thereby closing the loop because you're feeding it back into the system. I'm drawing a circle in the air. So instead of discard, you're going back to the beginning and using it again to make something new. That's what the future is. It's so interesting that you're talking about shoes because it's something that really we haven't started to see the possibility of. Like right now, I throw my shoes in the landfill bin. I am so sorry. So I think really hard about never throwing anything away, but we can't recycle shoes in this country. So there's no service. There's nothing to do.
Yeah, well, that's the issue we've been facing that. You know, we've found someone that we think, because we have a shoe label, so we're like, we can't bear the thought of all these shoes sitting there in landfill.
Yeah, like obviously we always encourage our customers to like, you know, pass them on to like a Salvos or a friend, like at the end of when they've had enough of them. But like now we're talking about, okay, well, what about at the end of its life? Once like you've stomped on it for many, many years, then what happens?
I think one of the problems with shoes, which is similar to bras, is that there are lots of different components. So when you talk about circularity as a system, and apologies if I'm getting too technical, it's easier to recycle and continue to feed into a loop bioresources. So if you've got, for example, organic cotton that hasn't even been treated with any chemicals, you could compost that thing. It can keep going back into the system, right? But if you've got a complex thing which is made from different materials, like a shoe that might have wood or rubber and fabric and leather and metal, then you've got to try and disassemble all of that, and that's actually really complicated. It doesn't mean it can't happen. It just means it's the next phase.
Yes.
I think there are a lot of you know, sustainable labels out there. Majority of them are like, you know, I want to say a plain aesthetic.
I was about to say a t-shirt.
Yeah.
Some
you know,
hemp
like,
pants.
Yeah, just even you know, even like there are like a lot of swimwear labels coming up and things, and they're all a plain aesthetic. A lot of them are a plain aesthetic. And for us, we like to be really out there. We know you love sparkly, beautiful things. And that's where I guess some people switch off at the moment because they hear sustainability and they're like, boring, I'm not into that plain aesthetic. And that's something that, you know, really excites us. We really want to, you know, our products that we create are definitely out there and beautiful. Is that something you think that is going to be coming through more in the sustainable sector now?
It's been slower coming. You're absolutely right about, you're not right about hemp, because not only is not all sustainable stuff made of hemp, but also hemp is quite sexy. Like Kit X is designed by my friend Kit Willow, who we were just with here at David Jones doing this Fashion Revolution event today. But Kit's really all over hemp. She loves it. And she's making it like super glamorous. So actually,
okay, I was just imagining, you know, like some like
a hessian sack.
Yeah, exactly. Like some skin-colored pants, but not the nice skin color.
I'm just totally giving you shit now, but hessian sack's also very chic. Seriously. So I was at the Green Carpet Awards, which is Livia Firth's initiative that runs at the last day of Milan Fashion Week in September, where it's like a red carpet event at La Scala with all glamorous celebrities, and they are awards for sustainable fashion and ingenuity in that realm. And the best emerging designer last year in September 2018 had used upcycled coffee sacks.
Oh my God.
I'll send you a picture. You can put it on your social media.
Okay.
I can't say his name. I want to try. Gilberto Calzarardi.
Great Italian accent.
We don't know what it's supposed to sound like, but that sounded pretty Italian to me.
He had used these coffee sacks, which are just sacks, and then made them into evening wear, and they're embellished and they're glamorous, and you wouldn't believe. But the t-shirt aesthetic has loomed most large, I think, and it's a struggle for me because I like glitter.
You do. I know. We actually
glitter is bad for the environment.
Yeah,
it's so bad.
We created some glitter shoes, and then everyone was like, "Those are bad for the environment," and we were like, "Crap!" And then we discovered metallic instead, which was the next best thing.
Good news. There is a new company called Sustainable Sequins Company or something like that.
Writing that down.
Same.
I'll find the exact name for you, but I found out about these guys in Amsterdam at the first sustainable fashion museum in the world called Fashion for Good, and they're developing completely biodegradable sequins, but at the moment they have created them that are using a high content, I'm not sure if it's like 70% of recycled plastic with a biodegradable shiny bit.
Cool. Oh, that's amazing.
I have seen people at Coachella this week posting about their biodegradable face glitter, which is cool.
Bio glitter. I mean, it's happening, and we need to do that because basically glitter is plastic.
Yeah.
And we need to be able to sparkle. Like, I'm glad I'm with my people because you're all totally shiny and I love it. And you're totally glittering to the hilt. And Lurex for days and pearls. And the problem is, if this is your aesthetic, you are just not going to go jump in that hemp plain t-shirt box in order to be sustainable. So we need more creative emerging designers to be melding those two things of high fashion sensibility with responsible production and sustainable materials.
So funny that you mentioned emerging designers, because we realized that we actually met you many years ago at an emerging designer show.
At a burger joint. Actually,
in the sky.
Yes, it was like a what are those things called?
It was like a train carriage.
A crate?
Was
a train carriage maybe.
And
it
was
was
like a tram
it was
carriage.
hanging off the side of a building, and now it's called Easy's Burgers, I believe.
I think then it was called Easy's.
I think it was the launch. It was just about to launch.
Oh, okay.
And Nixie Killick, we had her fashion show there, who is so awesome and incredible. Not even emerging anymore. She's a bit of an established designer now.
It was during Melbourne Fashion Week or Melbourne Fashion Festival, I forget. And Graham Lucy, who is it was
CEO.
It was Melbourne Fashion Festival.
It was,
Graham took me, and he said, "You got to see this. It's really great." And to me, that was the highlight of the whole week because it was a scene. And we were talking before about what drives us into fashion land. And for me, I like creative dressing and subcultures and the scene around design. And that was just so cool. I remember everyone. It was like a party. People all queuing up. Like looking at the queue to get in that place was just as interesting, or perhaps not just as, but equally as interesting as what was on the runway. And it just felt like this is a fashion happening and a fashion moment. And you were there and you were a moment, and I loved it.
Yeah, you're right. I remember distinctly waiting downstairs, and we were somewhere in the north of the city in Melbourne, and everyone was just like way cooler than us.
Yeah.
And it was just like
But I remember you very
eyes.
distinctly because you were fantastically dressed, and it was a big
I think we were dressed in Nixie.
Oh, we were dressed in Nixie. You're right.
We usually are. So we've been to a couple of shows of hers since, and everyone just like, she has this tribe that follow her, and like they all love to dress in her clothes, and they have the hair and like the face makeup on. It's pretty incredible.
So my favourite, I wasn't there because I was seriously not born, and then like 3, but in the sort of late 70s, turn of the 80s, Taboo was a nightclub in London, and I've got a book of it, and the characters who used to come along to this thing, just share some pictures, it's really interesting. It was where all the fashion kids were born, if you like. It was where Galliano used to go, dressed up to the hilt in stuff he'd made himself. It was where Stephen Jones used to go with his most wild and wacky hats. A guy called Lee Bowery, who's dead now, who is an Australian performance artist who used to go dressed like in kind of body altered upholstery, kind of crazy, weird, wacko performance piece outfits. But it was a nightclub where you went because you were the most creative and the most interesting, but it had nothing to do with buying the most expensive outfit. You had to make it.
Cool.
That's so
that sounds
cool.
amazing.
So we have a lot of emerging designers that we love. We actually discover a lot of them through VAMP's National Graduate Showcase, which is where we found Nixie. We also found Natasha Fagg. We found
Hayley Elsa Essa.
And even in London, we look at the design schools there. Like Cleo Pepiat is this amazing British designer who we wore to London Fashion Week. Do you have any fave up-and-comers?
So I was going to say, I went to the VAMP National Graduate Showcase this year, and it was just
so did we.
Great. I thought it was head and shoulders above anything I'd been seeing internationally. It was really good. It was such a strong year, I thought.
It was incredible.
A guy called Benjamin Garg I don't pronounce that very well, Garg, who's out of the RMIT master's program. I think he's phenomenal. He's like Indian Molly Goddard. So like extremely pleated and layered. It's like a traditional Indian gauze fabric, but he's dragged it kicking and screaming into the modern era. Absolutely amazing. Like I sent it to Vogue Italia and said, get this guy. Who else?
Oh my God, cool.
Replica Project, which is Mandy Nichols's label. She just won an award. She used to work for Baz Luhrmann.
Yes.
Both of these two people are very interested in sustainability, which made me punch the air. And then also talking about Taboo and Nixie Killick and all those kind of scenes, I look for it in London, and that's where it lives. It really does. I just went to the St Martin's show
which is a fashion school in
Central
London.
St Martin's is like the big fashion school in London where all the, not everyone goes, but lots of big names are ex-students of St Martin's, and their show is a riot. Like it's a scrum, it's so much fun, it's like we were talking about the democratization. You got to go next time. If you just ring them up, they'll let you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then it's all the best graduates, and it's just electric, and everyone in the audience is just as good to look at.
Amazing.
Awesome. So
I feel like we could literally listen to you talk about fashion for forever.
100%. And before we wrap up, we always do quick fires. But before we do quick fires, just wanted to ask you one last question, which is, if there's anyone listening and they're really interested in sustainable fashion, they might not shop in a sustainable way at the moment. They might be looking for affordable options, and they love fashion and, like we said, sparkly and everything. What are some just quick, easy tips that they can take to really start on a sustainable journey?
Good news on this front, because actually it's got so much easier. So you can go a couple of routes. One is to use what's already in existence. So shop secondhand, swap with your friends, become a thrifter, be a flea market haunter, mend, make your own. If you've got that, do it. It's so great. So that's one way, and that's part of the circular economy and part of the future of how we're going to turn this ship around. But also support designers doing good stuff. So support the emerging designers who are placing sustainability at the center of their practice. Buy their stuff, buy their showpieces if you want to wear amazing creative things. And then in a more accessible way, we're seeing real change where big retailers are completely changing the game. So in this week, The Iconic has launched a new functionality where you can shop your values across 6,000 SKUs on the website. It's huge. So it's very easy. It's very accessible. Anyone can do it. Search for vegan, search for fair work, and you will find loads of different options. And just finally, we're recording this in the David Jones office, where I just was invited to come and talk about Fashion Revolution. And they're the big department store is behind the Fashion Revolution campaign. And they're highlighting the work of lots of Australian labels that are really pushing sustainability. And I will name check them because they're all fabulous.
Amazing.
Basic, Outland Denim, Kit X, Manning Cartel, some more.
Was there Nobody Denim?
Nobody Denim?
Yeah.
There's 8 of them.
Well,
I'm
Tubes
missing
is
someone
actually...
at Victorian Woods.
Tubes is actually stocked at David Jones, and you will see this week that we're going to be releasing our pictures that we took when we were in China last month of our team, all with their I Made Your Shoes signs.
Oh, that's so great. And honestly, just the fact that a big department store is getting behind this for the second year in a row, the Fashion Revolution campaign, it shows that we're actually mainstreaming this conversation, and that means everyone can join in.
Yeah,
Totally.
absolutely.
So cool.
Killed that. Okay, let's do 2 quick fires because you really got to go. What's the most British thing you do or habit you have?
Crisp sandwiches.
Okay.
What's crisp sandwiches?
Like
You
chips.
just, it's a sandwich. You put chips in it.
Oh, yum. I want to try that, like with butter or something.
Bit of cheese if you're lucky.
Great. Who is the most interesting person you've ever interviewed?
You two.
You haven't
You didn't
interviewed
interview
us.
us.
Why
But
not?
that
It's a
was real-
two-way conversation.
That was very nice.
You really want to
Very.
get to the airport. You're like, first thing that comes to my mind.
All right, I'm going to say I've had the most fun this week with you two. The most famous person I've interviewed is Queen Bey, and the most inspiring person I've interviewed is Ellen MacArthur, who is the founder of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is the font of all knowledge about circularity.
Very
Amazing.
cool. All
That
right.
sounds
Anything you
cool.
want to plug before you head to the airport?
I think we need to have a massive war on plastic pollution, and if you want to be an activist, just start in your own life and start kind of rooting out the plastic in your day-to-day life, even the glitter.
Oh, no.
RIP.
Go bio glitter.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Hey.
Thank